about assessment, and that will involve learning targets and success criteria. So the first objective is to discuss the purpose of assessment and importance of aligning assessment to competencies and learning goals, and then relate the value of training students to self-assess their learning, explain the help learning targets and success criteria provide for teachers in student assessment of learning, discuss the value of formative assessments and feedback towards students regarding their achievements, and writing sample learning targets, success criteria, and formative summative assessments for the learning competencies. Just like to know, and you could use the emoji, raise your, do a thumbs up if you are already doing anything related to success criteria. Anybody here doing anything related to success criteria? Okay, so it seems that I've yet to see hands go up. This is not really something that is new, but since the pandemic, people have started using success criteria, but we look at it in relation to learning targets. So these are the materials, and again, you can update that based on your group's discussion. Okay, so now to begin the session, we just bring the participants back to this diagram, recapping that we have covered in sessions 5 and 6, which is the morning of day 2, the discussion of the teaching of acquisitions and make meaning using convergent and divergent type of thinking activities. And so the question is, how do we get evidence of the mastery of the acquisition and the make meaning? So this is usually the work of assessment. It is the ongoing process of gathering, analyzing, reflecting on evidence to make informed and consistent judgments to improve future student learning. So the key part here is to get evidence. We have, of course, we all know, 4 general forms of assessment: selected response, constructed response, performance assessment. And the one that does not really involve any pen and paper, but involves active observation of students or conversations with students. And below each form, we have specific formats for carrying this out. So the question is, how do we know when to use a certain form? How do we know when to use selected response, constructed response, performance assessment, observation assessment? What is going to guide a teacher in making those decisions? Eric Tubo, what do you think?
Good afternoon po, Doc Mike.
Yes.
In my case, there are several aspects that we need to consider. First, let's go back to our curriculum map because it contains different competencies and different aspects of our lesson plan po, sir, po, Doc Mike. That would be all po.
Okay. So in the curriculum map, what are we going to focus on so that we know what assessments to make, Eric?
Maybe our priority would be the competencies po, Doc Mike, because it will tell us whether we are focusing on the acquisition, make meaning, or for transfer. From that po, we can determine different activities or assessment rather to measure students' understanding.
Okay, so we have to think about aligning again, no? Going back to the idea of constructive alignment. You just do not make assessments for the sake of being able to give a test. We want to get evidence of achievement of a competency. So how can teachers determine that? One way is to use this classroom assessment matrix. So on the first column, you have the different targets in learning. Okay. Sometimes the target of instruction is knowledge mastery. Another is reasoning proficiency, skills, ability to create products, and dispositions. And across from left to right, you have the different forms from selected to written response to performance, extended response, performance, and then observation and conversation. Okay. So how does this particular matrix work? When we use the short response, selected response, extended response. So it will depend on what we have. So if we go to the first column, we also can see the connection of the targets with the learning goals of A, M, T, T for both skills and ability. And of course, this position would be more on the affective side, not necessarily only on the cognitive side. Okay, so let's take a look at this. And what I'd like you to do is critique, no? The choices that a teacher would have may have done for a particular unit. So, for example, for the target of ability to create products, the teachers decided selected response. For the target of reasoning and proficiency, the teachers decided short response. For the target of what do you call this? Wait, I think this got moved, no? For the target of knowledge mastery, the assessment method is performance. For the target of dispositions, the assessment method is observation and conversation. Okay. So let's take the first two, the one with the targets for transfer, skills and ability to create products. So you have one for selected response, the other one for short response. Okay. So what's your comment on that? Rowena Amaro?
Good afternoon po.
Yes, good afternoon.
About the frame, the alignment of target and method, it is based on for example, the knowledge mastery is in the performance, a performance method.
Yeah. Start first with the transfer. We're just going up, no? So for ability to create products, the method is selected response. For skills, the method is short response.
Okay po. For the transfer method, for the transfer,
Target.
the ability to create products is in the alignment of selected response, wherein we use the true or false, multiple choice, and matching. So,
So what do you say about that?
from the
Decision.
assessment po, what can I say is that it is from the surface level.
So is there alignment?
No, sir. there is no alignment.
Okay. Because
Because po, in transfer method, in transfer target, we can say that we need to use a higher or deeper learning and assessment. While in making meaning, it is also for the deeper or
we're looking
the
first at transfer. So for skills, is there alignment? Skills will be
uh,
measured by short response.
in the skills po, the short response, fill in the blank and short answer. No po.
And the reason
Is it because you are targeting the skills of the students? Wherein in the assessment, it only targets the knowledge part of the students.
okay, so for transfer ability to create products, what should be the method?
For the
If it's not
ability,
ability to create products for that target,
it should be in the performance
okay, what
level or
about
method.
skills? What about skills?
Skills po, it should be in the, it can also be in the performance po.
Okay, because what is performance involved in relation to these targets?
The ability of the students to perform and to apply what they have learned po.
Okay, let's take the next two regarding reasoning proficiency. The method is extended response, and for knowledge mastery, the method is performance. Ophelia, kay Tiles, what do you
Yes
think?
po, good afternoon.
Yeah,
In the
comment.
performance level,
Is there alignment here?
uh, in the knowledge mastery po, or
Yes. Take first that one. Knowledge mastery. The method is performance.
there is no alignment. I think the knowledge mastery po is under the selected response only
Okay.
and
Why?
short response, because it falls on the acquisition level only for the students to identifying facts, just a mastery method.
And then what about this reasoning proficiency? Is there alignment?
The reasoning proficiency, which falls under extended response. Essays, research report, I think this falls under performance po. Their ability
So if they
their,
have to do reasoning, they have to do public performance?
I think displaying their critical thinking skills.
When we say public
Uh,
performance, for example, doing like a performance task.
I think po, when they do investigatory projects, maybe they need their skills in reasoning.
Okay, maybe that part, but if I just want to know how do they reason on something, do they need to have an investigation?
In the performance task,
No, just to get their reasoning. Do I
And
need
the
to have a
extended
performance
response
task in order for them to show me reasoning, or is the extended response sufficient?
sufficient na po in the essay. Okay na po siya. No need to really perform to get their ability to reason out. So
Okay.
essays, research, okay na po.
Take the last one, the one of disposition. The method is observation, conversation. Finding out their attitudes, their ability to persevere na task.
Yes po, I think aligned po siya, like yung interviews, discussion with the groups, aligned po siya.
Okay. So, what can you say about this matrix? As you were answering, what did it enable you to do?
We are being guided. It's
Guided in
our
what?
in our assessment on what to in our assessment making. We are being guided, especially in the application of our in the mastery of the knowledge and their reasoning skills, and also their ability to create. We are being guided in this kind of matrix.
Okay, so we're being guided in making decisions and making
Yeah.
sure that there is alignment, no,
Uh,
of the target and the method. So when we
Yes
keep
po.
on saying about alignment, we're looking at the form with the learning goal. So if we're going to the different descriptions here, I purposely took out first the descriptions, and then now I'm bringing in the descriptions. So for example, for reasoning and skills, you have a thumbs down there because what these are saying is that, like for example, go to under short response, reasoning proficiency, brief description, simple problem solutions can provide a shallow window into reasoning. Or for some of these that are not aligned, you do not directly get the evidence. Okay. So for example, let's look at the items that have a thumbs up. Okay. Darlene Sazon, can you read the first one for knowledge mastery? The two boxes with thumbs up.
For knowledge mastery target, the methods are can sample mastery of knowledge elements, and can sample mastery of knowledge elements and suggest understanding of relationships.
Okay. Now, can I ask Emmeline, can you take now the ones that are aligned for reasoning proficiency, which is under extended response?
Hello po, Doc Mike. For
Yes.
the reasoning proficiency target, the method is longer descriptions of complex problem solutions can provide a deeper window into reasoning proficiency.
Okay, so you notice this matrix is using the term a window. It's enabled to give you the evidence or a look into how students are thinking. Okay, Joneth, could you read the one for skills and ability for transfer?
Sure, Doc Mike. For the learning target under skills, the appropriate method is performance, as it can directly observe and evaluate skills as they are being performed.
And the second one can assess directly.
Yeah, and the other one, Doc, is under observation and conversation. Oh, I mean, for the ability to create products, it's still under performance as it can assess directly proficiency in carrying out steps in product development and attributes of the product itself.
Okay, and the last one, can you take the one under conversation for disposition?
Yeah, for this position, Doc, the appropriate method is observation and conversation, as feelings and attitudes can be explored and probed in depth here.
Okay, so these show now, the description show why the alignment is there. So when there is now alignment between target and method, what else does that do to the assessment? When there is an alignment of the learning goal with the form of assessment, what else does that make of the assessment? Sheila May Ledesma.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. If there is an alignment, Doc, between the assessment and the method, we assure there is also validity in the assessment that we give because we measure what we intend to measure if we use the right kind of assessment.
Okay, very good. So when there's alignment of target and method, the assessment is valid. There is validity. And that is what we as teachers need to constantly be thinking about. So this is what we're going to show to teachers in a visual way, what makes for validity, no? Because of the learning goal and the method of assessment. Okay, so given that, we're going to just plot in this table examples of assessments for the different competencies. So for example, like this, just plot the LC number. You can even type in the LC itself just so that it's clearer for the teacher to see what type of assessment will align that particular competency. Okay, and then the teachers will do an exercise on this. So again, you can divide the competencies per group. So let's say, for example, competencies 1 to 3, you assign it to a pair. Competencies 4 and 5, assign it to another pair, and then let them discuss, and then they will contribute. Okay. Right. So we have been talking about teachers' design of assessments. They need to be aligned and they need to be valid. But the other important part of assessment is the work of the student, not just the work of the teacher. And so this now involves self-assessment. So self-assessment in recent years has been recognized as a big part of effective learning. And because in self-assessment, students are aware of the kind of answers they make, the reasons for their answers, and the gaps they have, and how to correct them. So this process of self-awareness is what we also refer to as metacognition, intentional thinking about how one thinks and learns. So another simple way to define metacognition is thinking about thinking. So if I'm studying something, I explicitly think aloud to myself, what am I doing at this time? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? So for example, in one's mind, one can be saying, I am figuring out, or what are the steps that I need to follow here? Or I am wondering, what do I already know about this topic? Where did I get stuck when trying to solve this problem? And it reminds me of. So with metacognition, students are in more control of their learning. They develop independent thinking skills, and so they become more self-directed. No? In past trainings, we have been talking about SDL, self-directed learning, wherein students are able to also correct themselves. Now, what's going to help students do all this self-assessment is we can look at two things: learning targets and success criteria. So learning targets are concerned about what students are going to learn, and success criteria is concerned with how will students learn what they're supposed to learn. So let's tackle the first one of learning targets. So they are statements of the intended learning based on standards, and they're written in kid-friendly language specific to the lesson for the day. Okay, so I think part of this has already been covered in the previous training for the new teachers. Am I right, Rafi?
Yes, Doc Mike.
Okay, so let's just first watch this video on the power of learning targets and how that actually helps students take charge of their learning. Brian, can we play the video?
All right, so we're gonna get started. Dejor, will you read our main target for us today?
I can group ideas together within my body paragraph to best support my thesis.
All right, so at this point, we've done a lot of work.
When we go into the classroom, usually the first thing that we see for the day is our learning targets.
Building off of that.
The learning targets aren't really just there. The teachers usually make sure that everyone understands what's going on before they dive into the learning.
And what I'd like to just know, what are some things that you're noticing right now?
A lot of times the teacher will take time in the beginning of class to break down the learning targets so we know what we're trying to go for, and it gives kind of a purpose.
And I'd love for you to have a conversation with the folks in your group about what you remember, and you can actually pull those pieces out. What were some of the things that were included in a body paragraph?
It sort of consists of like a more RDF or like a point or a statement.
Yeah, and then more like about the book. Like
There's a lot of peer sharing and talking with the people at your table.
That's what I got.
And so you can kind of bounce ideas off of the people that you're sitting with to see if they maybe have a better understanding of it than you do.
So I think once you set them up in the intro paragraph, your body paragraph is where you like give them everything they need to understand.
I know personally what the teacher wants me to learn after she's explained the learning target at the beginning of class, but also I've asked any questions and clarifying questions as to what I need to know.
When you first get a learning target, a lot of people will kind of be unsure about what that really means, and that's where the self-assessment comes in, like the fist of 5, the thumb. So, and actually I think it's really important for the teacher to see that too, to kind of assess for themselves, okay, so where do I really need to address with this group of students? Do they really get it?
So thumbs up, thumbs down. If you guys feel like that part is...
Are they not really getting it at all? Then the teacher can feel confident they've got this target, they really know what to do, they really know where they're going with it. And then, you know, when there's some students that are kind of this way, they can kind of assess, okay, this student's gonna need some more help. And I think that really goes back to the whole topic of what Odyssey is really about, is making sure that all students succeed and that all students are doing well, and that it's no student is falling short while the rest are moving ahead.
Awesome. So you remember in the beginning of class when I said when you work on organization there's a bonus?
I know when I understand a learning target, when I feel like the confidence I can say that I can do whatever the learning target says, because a learning target isn't necessarily just like a purpose of what you're learning about, it's also a statement. So I think that once you do understand, I think it's the confidence that you can present it in through a project or whatever the teacher is asking you to do.
I can see myself doing a project or doing something that goes along with the learning target.
You can see yourself producing something or having a project that is gonna capture that target.
Not just some students know what we're being asked to learn about, all students understand the concept. And I think that's a concept that is very great, because if students don't really understand the concept of what they're trying to learn, then there's no way they can really succeed if they don't know what their purpose is.
You always know what you're doing, and you're very rarely confused about things.
And then here's the evidence of how the...
And I think that's like a lot of kudos to the teachers, because they do take the time to explain everything at the beginning of class, and they also take the time to explain anything that you have questions about individually or with the whole class, so the whole class can get what you're trying to get.
So Mark Ayala, are you here?
Yes po. Good afternoon po.
So in the video, we saw a number of examples of learning targets that were posted. So how were they written?
First po, the learning targets are written in a student-friendly manner, wherein the statement begins with an I can words, which eventually gives the student the opportunity to make their own learning, for the session more personalized, and at the end of the day they will be able to take part, or make responsible of their learning in the long run.
So how does that enable students to be able to self-assess themselves?
Because the statements are in the I can form, so the students are able to ask themselves if what the statement they are trying to achieve in an I can form is being achieved really, as the session progresses po.
Okay, all right. So have you had any experience related to learning targets in your own teaching?
Yes po. Basically, in our school, we have been practicing already the use of the learning targets as part of the unpacking of the learning competencies po. So we have the learning competencies, and then we unpack it to be. Of course, we can mention the learning competencies to our students, but that is still very broad, no? Of course, comparing to the standard, but making sure that the students understand that learning competency in their own language, that would help the students, make a great ownership of their learning at the end of the day.
Okay, so you've seen this happening with the students.
Certainly po.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we saw examples of learning targets in the video. Just again, to be clear, they're not the same as learning objectives, because learning targets are written for the day, learning objectives for a unit. Now, so for example, you have this. Of course, you will make your own example of a task that will happen for a day and that will happen for a unit. And the format, as mentioned, is different. Learning targets are usually written in ICAN form, and learning objectives are written in SMART goal form. Okay, so this is the new slide here compared to last year's. Just to lay it out to the teachers how the different things look like. Because when they hear terms like learning competency, learning objective, learning target, they all sound the same, no? But if you're going to be very technical about it, there are some differences. So let's look at the first one. You have from the Matatag a competency like that. And then teachers, in their plans, they may be, we're talking now about learning plans or lesson plans or modules. They may then draw out or unpack from the learning competency a learning objective that would be good for a unit. And so it's written in the SMART, SMART, measurable, attainable, realistic, relevant, time bound. So for example, by the end of the week, students will be able to analyze 3 persuasive techniques. So you'll notice in the original, there is no mention of 3, but this has been unpacked to 3 persuasive techniques, namely, so specific, ethos, logos, pathos, in written and spoken arguments. So in that form, so that it will be measurable, and apply this knowledge in a 5 to 7 minute attainable persuasive talk they will deliver. So relevant to the competency. Then you have the learning target, which breaks down the work of analyze, because analyze will sound like a very big word to students. So if you want them to do that, then we could also phrase it this way. For the entire, for things for a certain period, I can differentiate between ethos, logos, and pathos. Maybe another period is I can explain which parts of a text show ethos, pathos, or logos. Or I can write in a short speech examples of ethos, logos, and pathos. But if it's just really going to look at analysis, you can make it claim, evidence, reasoning. I can claim, I can explain which parts of a text. So that's like the evidence. And then I can support my choices. So that could be reasoning. And that could be an exercise done in a particular period. Okay, so just to again pick up now, after showing the difference between learning competency, objective, and target, we now look at more examples of the learning target in relation to your quarter one topic, because the teachers will also make their own examples for quarter two. Okay, so there is worksheet like this wherein teachers can do this as a group work, no? First column, the standard from the content, the learning competency, then the learning target, and after discussion of learning target, success criteria. Remember that the intention here is to see how teachers can facilitate more self-assessment, self-directed learning by the students. So at the bottom, you have their learning target, and then you have there the criteria, the guide in order for them to write for their unit an example of a learning target. So it doesn't have to be for all, as long as they're able to go through the process. So for example, again, you pair them up. For competency number 1, or this pair, you write learning target 1. For competency number 2, or this pair, you write learning target 2. Look at the guide below. So start with I can, student-friendly verb, align the verb with the standard, and it's doable in a class period. Okay, so here's an example for quarter 1, taking one competency and turning it into a learning target. Okay, so science, I'm using your one only of your learning competencies as the example. Okay, but that doesn't mean that this is already the work for the entire unit. So you will have to look at the others. No, this is dealing with one of the content standards that is in your grade 7 quarter 1. And then this is one of the competencies. And then this is an example of a learning target. So I can use diagrams, illustrations to show how particles are arranged and spaced and how they move in solids, liquids, and gases. So if you will compare the learning competency with the learning target, you can see that it is broken down further, like 3 states of matter, solids, liquids, and gases. Okay, then arrangement involving the particles, the spacing involving the particles. Okay, so that's the exercise for that particular one. So now we move into the success criteria. If I know that that is what students have to learn, phrased in kid-friendly language, how will they learn to do what they're supposed to learn? So this is the work of a success criteria. So what are the benefits of success criteria? They promote self-reflection. They allow the students to think critically about their learning process and identify strategies for improvement. Again, this is trying to make students be more intentional in their learning. Second, Success criteria encourages a growth mindset by emphasizing the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and dedication. So it may happen that students are not able to get all of the success criteria at the start, but at least they know some of them they've been able to accomplish, and the other things they need to improve some more. And third, success criteria empowers students to assess their own progress and set goals, thereby fostering a sense of ownership and responsibility for their learning journey. So this is an important part of their disposition. You saw in the video examples of this, no? Some students were self-reflective, others were talking about continuous improvement, so their growth mindset, and others were also talking about their sense of ownership and responsibility. Okay, so how do we write standards-based success criteria? Again, remember, we're always connecting with the K-12 standards. So first, it's important to have clear and specific criteria. Like learning targets, use student-friendly language. Have action verbs so that students know exactly what they're going to do, and to have specific descriptions. Okay, so here's the example of a success criteria. Notice how it shows to the students how they will accomplish the learning target. So if the learning target is, I can use diagrams and illustrations to show how particles are arranged, spaced, and how they move in solids, liquids, and gases, how will they know that they are learning it? So in my diagram, I'm able to include labels for particles in each state, accurately depict the spacing between particles in each state, show through arrows the motion of particles in a way that matches their state, use appropriate symbols as or representations for particles. For example, using spheres or dots. Okay. Now, what do you notice about the way these are stated, the success criteria? What do you notice about the way these are stated? Could I call on Violeta Apiles?
Good afternoon, Doc Mike.
Good afternoon.
For me, what I have noticed with the success criteria is that it also is seemingly following the pattern of the learning target, because it has their I am able to, which is very much connected to the learning target I can. And then we have their include labels for particles, the specific skills that will show the standard, which is diagrams and flow charts, are very useful in demonstrating and explaining motion and arrangement of particles. So the specific skills that will prove or serve as an evidence that the standards are actually attained are the ones that are used as the criteria for success. Thank you, Doc.
Okay, so thanks. And one thing that we can say, very good observation. It is like the learning target in the sense of if in learning target you have I can, in success criteria, it's translated into I'm able to. So I'm able to do what I am supposed to learn by, for example, including labels, depicting the spacing, show through arrows, use appropriate. And another thing that we can say about these success criteria and the reason how they become helpful to students is because they are all observable. We can observe the labeling. We can observe the depiction of the spacing. They are not just simply talking, because this is dealing with diagramming. We can observe the way the arrows are drawn. We can observe the choice of symbols, no? So it makes it very concrete to the students how they are going to do the learning target. Okay. Now, at the bottom of that last row, you have guides, no, to think about how to write it. So let's take the first one. Johnny Pensocas, can you read the first point under the last column?
Good afternoon po.
Yeah.
Align criteria with standard, learning competency, and learning target.
Okay, is there an alignment of this success criteria with the first three columns?
Yung example po ba, Doc?
In what is here on screen, because when we write the success criteria, we look at those points and we check our work. This is like a checklist, no? So the first one is saying the success criteria should be aligned with the standard, learning competency, and learning target. So my question is, naka-align ba tong success criteria?
Yes po, Doc.
How?
For example po, yung sa learning target is I can use diagrams and illustrations to show how particles are arranged. So my success criteria is, in my diagram, I am able to include labels for particles in each state. By showing the labels, you are able to use the diagram to illustrate the idea po.
Okay. So you can see certain connections, right?
Yes
Okay,
po, Doc.
take the second one, second point.
Focus on students' performance or product.
So is that achieved in the success criteria?
Yes po, Doc.
How?
Because it's very evident under success criteria that the students were able to achieve the learning target through the observable product, like the labeling, the labels included for particles, and also the accurate depiction of the spacing between the particles in each state, and also the showing through arrows the motion of particles, and also the use of appropriate symbols or representations.
Okay. Christine Busmion, could you take the next three?
Hi, Doc Mike. Good afternoon. State in student-friendly language. Use action verbs that indicate what students will do and have clear and specific descriptors.
So were these three achieved?
Yes, Doc Mike. In terms of student-friendly language, it also used I am, so it's more personal for the students, for the learners. And in terms of the specifics and the success criteria, it can be achieved within that particular session or within that particular day. And there are also clear action verbs that are indicated, and the descriptors also are very clear, other than it being aligned with the learning target and the learning competency.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we see all those points being accomplished, no? So that's how you're going to have the teachers look at it, go through these points so that they know what's going to guide them to write it, so that when they do the exercise, they know how to conduct that themselves. Okay, so you first have them do that, but of course, we can also turn to ChatGPT and see what can happen. And what would be the prompt for the learning competency of whatever? Give a corresponding learning target and success criteria. So now this is asking ChatGPT to do both. The learning target should start with I can and is easily understood by students. The success criteria begins with in my whatever is the output or performance, I am able to, followed by verbs of action. Okay, so an example would be for the learning competency of use diagrams, illustrations to describe the arrangement, spacing, and relative motion of the particles in each of the three states or phases of matter. Give a corresponding learning target and success criteria. The learning target should start with I can, is understood. The success criteria begins with, in my diagram, that's the output, I am able to, followed by verbs of action. So you can see how ChatGPT follows the prompt, no? Because the prompt is very structured. So you can see there the example of the learning target, the example of the success criteria that it's able to give. And we're just all dealing here with one competency. And most likely they are more the power competencies, no? Because these are the ones that will get more priority. So in the exercise, prior to using ChatGPT, teachers are just using one. Now, if it occurs to them, I'm only doing one, but I have to write these things. So what about if I have to do a lot of power competencies? So again, no, what is the help? Because the load can be also overwhelming. So as a way to help, then you could look at this prompt in ChatGPT, and then this is for your group to try it. Okay. Now, just to go back to the point about alignment, how will we know again that what we wrote is sufficient? So we can just go into the keywords and find out the alignment. No, so like in the learning competency, learning target, you have their use, and depict. And then you can see those that are underlined in black, those that are underlined in red. Again, this will make it clear for teachers how alignment is shown and how things are broken down across. The first two columns are really more for the teacher, but the last two columns are more for the students. And these learning targets and success criteria, they may be posted on the board, they may be placed in the LMS, they may also appear in a worksheet, they may appear also something that students are going to do as part of their group work. Okay, so there are ways in which students now will be working by themselves. So success criteria is not just limited for the learning targets. It can also become part of the formative, interim, and summative assessment. No? So just a brief distinction between the two. We know very well that formative assessment is given during instruction prior to the summative, and summative assessment is done after the whole instruction. And another way to do it using now analogy, formative assessment is like a physical checkup. So every now and then in a checkup, you find out to the doctor what is the condition. And the doctor gives a diagnosis, and usually the checkups are preventive, because if there are any going to be serious problems or illnesses, the checkup is already going to take care of that. So that is what formative assessments do. Even before a summative assessments are given, students are already checking on themselves to prevent, failures, so that they can really be able to do what's expected. On the other hand, the analogy of summative assessment is like an autopsy. No? Autopsy, patay na. Gusto mong malaman bakit namatay. O bakit? So if you compare that to summative assessment, it's like asking, why did the student fail? When there were no chances for formative assessment. And by the time that you try to do interventions, the quarter would have ended. So there's no point anymore in doing an intervention, or what teachers like to call remediation. No? So what use is the information intervention when the quarter is over? So it's like the autopsy, no? You don't anymore think of a cure when the body is dead, no? Because the autopsy, you're just finding out what caused it, but you don't have no intention of curing it all. So if we want our students to be successful, research is showing the more formative assessment we do, the more students are going to be helped. So working with success criteria can be a way of doing formative assessments. And when students are able to know how they're able to achieve the formative assessments, teachers can give feedback in different ways. No? So we have these different ways, and we're saying that for the most part, formative assessment also involves feed forwarding. We don't wait till the end for students to fail, and only later on do we try to do damage control. Okay, so as what one researcher said, students can learn without grades, but not without feedback. So feedback is going to be the one that will help students overcome their particular errors, misconceptions, and problems in learning. Okay, so I mentioned that success criteria can be also used for formative purposes. Here is one way of using success criteria for certain competencies. Let's say these are the power competencies. And they are placed here in this table at the center. On the left, you have growth, how I can strengthen my performance. On the right, glows, strong aspects of my performance. So students can be given a table like this, and then they can self-assess themselves. Are they growing with a certain success criteria, or are they glowing? Okay. So instead of talking about failures and successes, we put it in more positive terms, that there are areas for growth, and there are also areas where they are already glowing. Okay, so it gives it a more positive tone for the students, makes it more encouraging. So students can write on the left under growth how they can improve, and under glow they celebrate, what they're able to achieve and why they're able to achieve that. Okay, so for example, they were able to follow directions, or they were able to think of an alternative. So those kinds of answers are going to be welcome. The rubric can also be a source of the success criteria, but specifically level 3, the one that deals with satisfactory. So as students are doing the performance task as part of feed forwarding, you can concentrate your feedback on the level 3 as part of the success criteria. In this particular table, there were success criteria for certain competencies, and here the lower part is the combination of the success criteria with performance tasks, no? So this can be something that's like a journal of growing and a journal of glowing. Okay. Somebody yesterday raised the point about I think it was Tina Navarro, no? And the others, when I asked you to try inputting in ChatGPT a student's work and getting ChatGPT to make comments about it. So the third party in the room is not anymore just teacher student. The third party in the room in this process of feeding back is ChatGPT. And how would that work? So for example, you see on the left the performance standard. So in this example, the teacher, after having ChatGPT suggest certain criteria in the rubric, the teacher inputs, copies and pastes the students' work, output. Let's say this is an essay, and asks ChatGPT to rate it. Okay, so you can see here the ratings according to the rubric that was originally given. So you can see here already how quickly ChatGPT will give that. And then there is a comment below. Overall, the paragraph is fairly organized. So it summarizes. This is not just merely giving the quantitative part, because again, that will not mean much to students. What will be more helpful for students in order to achieve the success criteria are the comments which are qualitative. So you can see here below the comments that are summarized by ChatGPT. Okay, so as a teacher, you would now go over this and see whether you'd agree with it or not, okay? Because it has to be clear that it's the teacher who makes the decisions on the student's progress. It's not a machine, okay? But the machine can help you determine the student's progress. Okay, so let's say you have these ratings. What do some teachers do further with that? Okay, so ChatGPT is also able to reproduce or to point out which parts specifically for each prompt, because here in the overall report, you get the quantitative 2, 2, 3, 3. But ChatGPT can also give the qualitative feedback regarding each of those, no? And then again, it's all summarized. So you can see here the prompt that the teacher used. So the teacher tells ChatGPT, read the following paragraph, which was written by the students. So you can see the grammar, you can see the way it's written, etc. And in this case, it's just only one paragraph, so there's no need to see how paragraphs are broken out. And then we have there the second prompt, rate this paragraph. And then according to the rubric category 3210. And then ChatGPT now is going to give specific comments about each part. And then like what I showed you earlier, also gives a summary. Okay, now the more important part is to ask ChatGPT what are suggestions to the student. Okay, because it's not enough to say your work did this, your work did not do this. And of course, students will ask, so sir, ma'am, how can I improve? That is always a very sticky question, especially if a class of 40 students, right? So how do you handle that? How do you really give time for that for students? Okay, so some are trying this as a way to respond to that kind of a situation. So the prompt is give 5 suggestions to the students to improve the paragraph. Okay, so this is now a sample of what ChatGPT will give out. Give specific things to consider. Okay, and there's a description for each one. So the question is, will the teacher give all of this to the students? Just copy paste and said, okay, here, read. Or the teacher can be selective, decide which one will really be the focus of the students' improvement. Okay, and maybe the others, because, for example, let's say number 1 is a common problem for all. Maybe the teacher can point that out to the whole class, but maybe number 2 and 3 are very specific to the student himself or herself. So the teacher doesn't need to mention that as something that the whole class has to work on, but can do that with students, no? Can convey that to the students. Or if the teacher notices that comments, suggestions of 2 and 3 are applicable to 10 students, then the teacher can group those students and then give them that same comment. Okay, so there are different ways of being able to navigate this so that students get specific feedback about that. Okay, so Tina Navarro, what do you think of this?
This is a good suggestion, Doc, also because like you were mentioning earlier, if you have, for example, 42 students in a class, I think by asking ChatGPT to assist you in the checking of the work of the students, this will help. Although, while I was listening to you a while ago when you mentioned that you also have to check how many students may have the same comments here, and then you group them all together. That can really be a tough challenge because
Yeah.
you really have to, individually read the output of your students. And in my case, I am handling 3 sections, and there are around 120 of them. And then I might go crazy if I categorize them that all these students share the same kind of comment as given by ChatGPT. I think that would be
Yeah.
it will really be a challenge on the part of the teachers to really categorize group students according to the similarity of comments provided by ChatGPT in their output. But I find this also very interesting because this will save time for us teachers in the checking of our work. Although yesterday when I was reading the language used by ChatGPT, the implication of that is teachers who are going to use ChatGPT in assessing students' output, in terms of the language usage, we must have more or less the same tone or the same choices of words. Otherwise, our students may find unusual when we do feedbacking or should we really say your work is checked by ChatGPT, Doc Mike? Should
Yeah.
we tell students?
No, very good things because for every new way of doing things, you have new questions, so those are some of the issues to raise. Of course, all of that should be also part of the discussion of the school's management of learning involving chat
Yeah.
GPT. No, that's now an institutional decision. But of course, before administrators make that decision, teachers should already be experiencing it so that they have a better idea and the administration is better informed before making policies, no? Because teachers will also have different reactions. Some would say, I'm really being helped by this. Some would say, yeah, I like it, but there are challenges. So things like that, no? For every new thing that you bring into the teaching learning setup, you always will be having new challenges, new questions. And that's how the learning grows, no? Now, just on your other comment regarding clustering of students, you could just, for example, remember that if you are doing this in one continuous thread, let's say you're doing this continuously for 20 students, you can have ChatGPT cluster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's all in one thread. So, for example, you can tell ChatGPT, for all the things that I said, give me a count of how many did this, and did that. Or ask them to make a general summary. So I would encourage you to try that, no? See how that works. Because also, if you see that it's a general trend, it's not just one student, it's not just particular to 2 students, etc. You as the English teacher, this also applies to Filipino because you're working with languages, then you can just have, as a general discussion with students, no? These are the things that are coming out. So if you have this problem, this is what you do. If you have this problem, this is what you do. Okay? So something like that. And eventually, you'll notice that there are recurring problems. There are recurring errors of students. And that is very important data that will help you again revisit your curriculum map as a school and decide what are we going to do, because we have this recurring skill gaps, no? So why are they happening at grade 8? Why weren't they taken care of at grade 5, grade 6? So if you belong to a 2-level institution, you can now give that feedback and you have it in data, no? You just don't tell the teachers, you know, I wish the teachers at a lower grade level would teach better. That comment does not come across positively, no? But if you're just going to say, in our level, we notice this problem, so how can we address it so that when they come to us at this level, they are not anymore going to show this kind of skill gaps, okay? So those are things that curriculum, academic coordinators, vice principals really need to deal with, no? But again, you can, I think, have a better way of dealing it when you really have specific examples, that you're not just only making anecdotes or stories, no? And teachers can see in the other grade level, oh, here's what my students are writing. So how are we going to address that? Okay. So these are things, now we're not saying that these are solutions. These are things that can be considered. And we are just showing the teachers possibilities. Okay. Because we also need to make them see we are really at the threshold of a new way of doing things. No? And if we're going to be relevant to our students who, when they graduate, will be working in a world of AI, then we need also to be ourselves prepared. We also need to be able to anticipate that and see what are the limits of this intelligence of AI. But we will not know the limits if we will not push it. We will not be able to really see what needs to be done correctly and what needs to be avoided. Okay. So that should really come from direct instruction experience. Okay. So what is going to be the task? The task then is to write that. Teachers will come up with the example in quarter 2. So they're just building, no, you're just slowly building this table. You already have actually the first 2 tables, but the first 2 columns, but the last 2 columns is something that you build step by step. Okay, so where does it lead to? The success criteria could also be useful for test construction. So an example here is that for this particular types of success criteria, in order now to get evidence that the students in a summative assessment are able to do what the formative assessments are doing, then we can match, align the tests with the criteria, the learning target, and the competency. So if this is a type of, what do you call this, acquisition type, because they're just supposed to indicate spacing, arrangement, and motion, then we could, for this type, it could be the use of the multiple choice. So you have there questions that are related to the actions, okay? In fact, if we are going to really follow the standards-based model, it will help a lot if you have these assessment items in advance, because now you can see how this will help determine, working backwards, what students will do in the success criteria. Okay, so this will work both ways: learning target, success criteria leading to assessments, or the assessments. Now, how do we determine the assessments? When we're clear about the learning targets, success criteria, then we're in a better way to make sure that our assessments are aligned with the competency, thereby making them more valid. Okay, so you have here again examples, and again, this is generated by ChatGPT. Another way to draw that out. And again, like what I was saying, if you have it all in one thread, not was just a continuous discussion with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just going to build on a previous response. So it's not going to be difficult to give a prompt like this. So the prompt reads, write n number of items, type of test, items for the following actions. Success criteria action 1, success criteria action 2. If we're looking for more alignment. Okay, so write 5 multiple choice test items for the following competencies, or actually those are the success criteria. Accurately depict, show through arrows, and use appropriate symbols. Okay, because if you now want to see the success criteria, the students did it by themselves. Now I want to see if they are really ready or they are really able to do, then this is something that could be done. So you can see here in what ChatGPT did for the prompt that was given, it gives first the corresponding success criteria, and then it gives the test question. So you can already see alignment between the test question and the criteria. Okay. So in the traditional table of specification, we formulate test items with learning competencies. Now, in the age of AI, you may formulate test questions in line with success criteria and learning targets. So here's an example of the alignment. The alignment was already given in the ChatGPT product, but just as a way for teachers to see how is that part of the success criteria assessed, where is it assessed, the next part, where is it assessed, and so on. Okay, so this is meant to be summative. But again, it can also be used as interim, which means that it is a practice for the summative. So in a sense, it can also become formative. So that by the time you give another similar set, you will have more student success instead of at the end anticipating and seeing that, oh, there's so many failures. So where was the problem? And there's always a tendency to blame the students. But if we did not give sufficient practice, exercise, then students may not be performing as well as we do. Okay, so again, this is giving teachers examples, no? So by extension, since we're already at assessment, we can also get as evidence that students really know, are really masters of the competency. Because remember, the goal is how do we really determine there's mastery? So we determine mastery by having learning targets, success criteria. We have those summative assessments. But let's see if we give error analysis items. Can they spot the errors? Because if they do, then they are really masters, or they really have mastery. So error analysis plays a crucial role in improving student mastery by providing insights into students' misconceptions. Because sometimes the error is not because the student is neglectful, although that happens a lot, but the error is because the students have a misconception, which makes them do the error repeatedly because they don't have the correct understanding. Okay, so how can a teacher see that? You create a test item deliberately with misconceptions and ask them to spot the error. Or we can also inform structural decisions and strategies by addressing errors. Error analysis also will be useful for enhancing teaching effectiveness and student learning outcomes. So here is a way of classifying errors, error types. It could be because of misunderstanding. It could be because of calculation errors, or there's a lack of attention to detail, misinterpretation of instructions. The instructions are not clear. That's why there were a lot of errors. lack of practice or review, and careless mistakes. So you have on the right the descriptions. Okay. Now, what is the help that this can give? J.R. Velasquez. J.R. Velasquez, are you here?
Hello po, Doc. Pardon po.
So what is the help that a table like this can give to teachers?
It would be very helpful to the teachers, Doc, because for instance, you could be able to really choose what would be the things you need to do or to include po in your assessments or activities.
We're looking here at errors, huh? So we have a classification of errors. It's not about writing assessments. It's about understanding students' errors. So if we have a table like this, what does that do to our understanding of student errors?
We can really help the students po, Doc, with regards to the errors they have in their output.
How can we be helping students if we have this kind of classification of errors? So for example, now in current practice, let's go to current practice. Now, you see a student making the errors. So what comes into your mind when students are making errors? Several students are making the same error.
You have to change po your your method or assessment if the students are repeating in committing errors po in their output.
So would that already be the immediate step?
Before
People are
changing,
making a lot of errors, siguro palitan ko na yung strategy.
Before po changing the method or strategy is you have to inform the students with their mistake or error by giving feedback with their outputs.
Okay, so that's how you're thinking about it. Gino, you're raising your hand.
Yes, Doc. If you notice, Doc, that there are common errors, you can diagnose and determine if you need to reteach, okay, or if there are common errors and you see some students who did not commit this error, you can ask them to teach their peers or to coach their peers. Or if it's really a general problem, Doc, now that really the students really don't, majority or all of them have not mastered this particular skill and there's an error in this, then you would have to really go back.
Okay, so let me ask, since you're also an administrator. So when you're dealing with teachers and they report to you, students are doing these errors, what would be an important question to ask them regarding the errors that they see? You as a coordinator or as an administrator?
Una, Doc, tatanungin ko gaano karami. If it's across the board, no? Gaano karami ba yung errors na ganyan? And then what were the assessments? What were the activities that you did in the class, no? To see baka naman misdiagnosed or accurate ba yung diagnosis? And in how many assessments did the students demonstrate these errors? Trying to dig deeper first, Doc, in getting the information, finding out.
Okay, so you would ask them how many, and then what were the assessments? Okay, so those were the questions, no? Okay, Rene, what questions would you ask?
Yeah, yes, Doc. I was just reflecting on the question you asked earlier on what kind of help will teachers get from a table like this. I was thinking, maybe a table of errors like this can help teacher establish patterns of errors of among learners. And in the process, teachers will eventually be able to tell whether targeted instruction has been achieved or not. And in the process that the teacher rather can.
Teacher can. Rene, are you still there?
Teachers can adjust curriculum and assessment design in the process.
Okay, so that would be important, no? Finding out the patterns of error, or specifically, what type of errors. So I just go back to Gino's answers, no? Because often enough, that is a common question when there are many errors. Ilan? But to ask before asking ilan, maybe ang dapat na tanong ay, anong klaseng error? Kasi baka naman, careless mistake. Baka naman, misinterpretation of instruction. Or lack of attention to detail. No? So when you have a table like this, especially for the administrators, it's good to ask the teachers, how do you classify the errors? Because that is not often done. Teachers are busy counting errors and they're conscious about it because it somehow feels it reflects on their effectiveness and efficiency. Okay. But again, if we really want to be student-centered, standards-based for the administrators in the group, we need to create a learning environment where teachers are constantly inquiring into their practices. And one of the things that they could inquire to their practices is, when I see my students having errors, is it enough to ask how many? Maybe I should ask the other question is, what are these types of errors? And since I am now able to diagnose the type of errors and then following what Rene says, patterns in the errors, then I will have the corresponding intervention. Okay? Because, for example, reteaching might not be the answer if the error is just a misinterpretation of instruction. No, the students get it, but the instruction that the teacher gave was not clear. Okay, so this is a way, again, for a teacher to self-assess their own assessment of student errors. Yes, Gino, you're raising your hand.
Yes, Doc. I was thinking more if the error is conceptual, and really it's a misunderstanding of the concept. And then you're right, Doc. No, teachers must have that habit of not just counting the errors and asking saan ang root, bakit ganito yung error, also to reflect, to improve their practice. No, it's like using the data. One last point, Doc, I wanted to share kanina with the success criteria, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Doc, in the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you have students with special needs, no, and they really need help, it actually gives the teacher and the student a way to look at the map on how to help that particular student to be guided. No, it also, parents can also, no, if parents ask, how can I teach my child to accomplish this particular task? Then you can tell them, no. And then lastly, Doc, as a checklist, if students ask, sir, saan ako nagkamali dito? And then you can say, let's go back to the checklist. Let's make this a checklist. O, ginawa mo ba to? Did you do this and this and this? And it's easy now. Instead of looking at the score, it's really critiquing them, how they were able to accomplish the task, or if they accomplished the task as we expected it. Thank you, Doc.
Yes,
Good afternoon,
that's very
everyone.
true. Yeah, that success criteria actually gets more extended with special ed schools. No, actually, this concept of success criteria comes from the tradition in special education, where we really try to diagnose the source of a student's difficulty. And we now, instead of focusing on the difficulty, focusing on what will make it successful. No. So when you say success criteria to students, it becomes more appealing because now they know that if they do the success criteria, they will be successful because it's really broken down into chunks, no? And I like your point, Gino, about parents, because for parents who also want to know, how will my child improve or how will my child be successful? The school can say, we have success criteria that will guarantee your children will be successful. And you can look at this success criteria, run it with your child, and then you can have like a dialogue with the child regarding that, no? So it's not enough to just give the assignment, but also to give probably a corresponding success criteria so that the teachers and the parents will have common expectations. And so when it comes now time during the PTA meeting, it's much easier for the teacher to explain the students' performance because they can all talk about the success criteria, which is transparent to everybody. Okay, so good point for sharing. All right, so we were now talking about error analysis. So it's much the alternative practice to merely counting how many students did not get it is to really first have understanding the error so that we can have the proper intervention. Okay, so in terms of now coming up with error analysis items for mastery, then these are samples. Again, you can look at this as formative or as summative, no? And you can have a data bank of this. So you can see here, these are all again produced by ChatGPT, no? Again, going through the thread. So let's look at the example of how ChatGPT phrased it. Diagram shows particles with downward pointing arrows. And then the error analysis item is identify the errors in this representation of any gas particles motion. Explain why the error is present and how it misrepresents the behavior of gas particles. Provide a corrected version of the diagram. So if the problem is, as diagnosed, misconception, then this one is going to be able to show that through proper representation. Okay. All of these items don't need to be taken all at once, right? It can be just part of the teacher's activities. Like, for example, one of this is going to be like an exercise. Another one can be like an interim assessment. And then another one is going to be for the summative. Okay. And the thing that again, we're looking at is the alignment. We can also have students for making meaning type of competencies, share their misconceptions and their corrections. As part of formative, the online, you can also do that, like in a Padlet application. Have students talk about what are the errors that you realize and what are your corrections. Okay, so here we can now look at a more extended table with those kinds of questions. The assessment of acquisition of knowledge can be questions aligned with the success criteria and error analysis items. Okay, so as a recap, assessments are important because these provide teachers with information about students' progress in and evidence of achieving the learning standard and competencies. Second, assessment is done in various formats in order to measure students' mastery of different learning goals, from acquisition to making, meaning, and transfer. In order for assessments to be valid, the choice of assessment formats or methods is dependent on and aligned with the level or order of thinking. Then we went to discussion of point number 3. Assessment is not only the teacher's work. Students need to be trained to self-assess their work so that they can own their learning and take responsibility for their progress. Students can be helped to self-assess by writing learning targets that are stated. And then learning targets differ from objectives. Aside from learning targets, we also discuss success criteria and the importance of aligning success criteria. Teachers can use and students can use success criteria in a formative way to inform them about the progress of their learning. When students self-assess their learning with success criteria, they're able to make improvements and they become more prepared to answer summative assessments. And error analysis tests may also be written to determine more specific areas of improvement. These are also written in line with learning competencies and expectations in success criteria. There are just 3 more points in this particular session. Results from error analysis provide teachers with more targeted feedback to students. Research shows that students can learn without grades, but not without feedback. Thus, when feedback is concrete, students show faster improvement in their learning. Feedback comes in varied forms, so we know what those forms are. And feedback also signals to the students their readiness to tackle summative assessments. The preparation of these summative assessments, again, aligned with learning competencies, goals, learning targets, success criteria. So in this way, the process of obtaining valid evidence of student learning becomes meaningful and productive. Okay, so for the workshop would be looking at the assessment table, learning targets, assess criteria, sample acquisition, sample error analysis, and check on the alignment. So these are just the tables where they can write, and that's the end of that lesson. Okay, any questions, clarifications for that session? Okay, so if none, we can have our break. We will resume at 3:30. Example report will be the content of the success criteria. Okay. So it's really about having qualitative descriptions. And also, if we are just going to show outputs, students might think that as long as I copy it that way, then I'm done. When actually it's not really so much the output that we need to make sure that they're able to do, but the skills that go behind the output, so that if they make the output, they can make their own kind of output and not necessarily just simply copying the examples you give. So it could also help if you have different examples of the same success criteria, so that students can see it's not really so much about the output, although that's part of it, but what led, no? What was the criteria that enables students to produce something like that? Okay. So Mike, does that clarify? Matias?
Yes, Doc. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you have again similar questions, fine, you could post here. Now, before we tackle the last part, no, I just want to do some quick reflection on our part. So we've already had about 7 sessions. So at this point in the training, what are your realizations or reflections? Just some quick quick comments. You know, it could be in the form of phrases, it could be in the form of one sentence. So can we do that now? Let's just post in the chat. Like, what are we realizing? What are we seeing? Okay, some are saying that commenting about the help of ChatGPT and that it is a ladder, not a crutch. Okay, I like that kind of an analogy. There rebranding of terms. Okay, change in perspective. Supportive learning environment where all students can thrive. Yes, that's a very important goal. That all students, not just some, and that all sections, and not just some sections in the grade level, can thrive. AI is not our enemy, but our help. Okay. Not to be afraid of exploring and maximizing AI tools. Yes. We always really have to find out what it can do and what it is not able to do. Okay, rapid changes in education, shifts in topic from learning recovery to peace education. AI needs to be standardized. That is really also the key. So standardize AI with respect to our work in dealing with K to 12. Inclusion of success criteria, analytical thinking is given emphasis, check alignment, use of the new unpacking table. And in relation to the theme, leading the students to the students' development of 21st century skills. So if we want our students to be possessing 21st century skills, so should teachers be also having 21st century skills. Today we're talking about constructive alignment in many ways, no? Not just within the curriculum map, but also in the way that we think about assessment and the way we think about instruction. Struck with success criteria, essential things to consider, critique the output, teachers' digital citizenship in action, okay? Shuffling of the CR steps, it's another realization. GIGO to CISO, okay? Everything should be aligned. Okay. Has the potential to enhance teaching, massive use of prompts for sentence openers. So you notice we use prompts in doing formative. We also use prompts in using AI. So prompts really have a lot of uses. Okay, these are good ideas. that you're posting here. Right, and as we go do more hands-on work, then we'll have more realizations. And I'm sure when you're sharing in your group, there are other realizations and reflections that you would be sharing, and more with the teachers. It really would be interesting to find out how the teachers in the coming rollout of INSET will respond to these things. Again, remember, we're not here to give all the answers by showing different things. We are also raising new questions. And we're also showing some ways of addressing that, but every school will have to find its own way in addressing those things. At least for now, teachers can see alternatives, no? And alternatives that are accessible, alternatives that can be empowering for them. In other words, they don't have to wait for an administrator to tell them what to do, what decision to make, or they don't have to wait for a parent to make a certain request. They can already act, no? Because the more teachers are empowered, the more they can be in control of the teaching and make sure that the students really get to achieve the learning competencies. Okay, so session 8 is about time to plan. Of course, that's now the learning plan. And in particular, we're looking at, in the Matatag, the 4 E's instructional design framework. And we're going to look at 4 E's in relation to other frameworks, particularly like 5 E's, where it seems to be derived from, and the PAC EFDT. Relate the K-12 program pedagogical features as stated in Republic Act 10533. How do we connect that with the Matatag 4 E's? Explain each section the EFDT learning plan, point out integration of values education, peace education topics. Although that peace education part, a lot of that was done yesterday. Then discuss PAC certification criteria for learning plans, and then writing the sample, which is actually just putting it together, no? Because teachers would have had ideas in the transfer session, the acquisition session, the making meaning session, and the assessment session. Okay, so the learning plan template is the one that will come out here. And this something that was already given out in session 1. So the focus question is, how do we design and assess a standards-based unit learning plan? Okay, so standards, not only the curriculum map, standards also in a learning plan. So how do we design? First, we look at what Matatag is saying in its general shaping paper. It presents the instructional design framework of the 4 E's, which is engage, explore, experience, empathize. So you have here in the general shaping paper, you have here the figure with the title, the IDF, Instructional Design Framework, which is the 4 E's. So we have here learning, there are elements here. You have not just 4 E's, but you also have 4 I's. So the 4 E's stand for engage, explore, experience, empathize. And in each one, we have the description, but I will use this table that the trainers who attended the DepEd were shown just to give the highlights, of each stage. Okay, so could I ask Ryan, can you just read this first in terms of engage, explore, experience, empathize?
All right. 4 learning events: engage, capturing learners' interest, creating a hook, provoking curiosity, establishing relevance, stimulating inquiry. For explore, hands-on discovery, active investigation, problem-solving task, independent exploration, and gathering information. For experience, immersive learning, real world application, practical scenarios, simulation and interaction, authentic experience. And for empathize, understanding others' perspective, fostering emotional intelligence, addressing diverse needs, and cultivating a supportive environment.
Okay, is there anything that you'd like to share about these 4 E's that you picked up from your training?
Okay. So during the training of the Matatag curriculum last Monday to Thursday, they were able to talk about the 4 E's on the last day, trying to trying to help teachers or the trainers design their activities in relation to the 4 E's. Because I think the goal is for them to be able to come up with pedagogies or approaches wherein those competencies can be translated into classroom instruction. What I noticed, Doc Mike, is that when the teachers, especially the trainers themselves, when they are able to give feedback on the activities of the participants during our training, I'm speaking on behalf of the English group because I did not see the others. In our room, the trainers were focusing more on the engagement of the activities rather than the alignment of the activities in terms of the competencies being unpacked. For example, there was like a competency that was chosen by the participants to work on, the distinguished fact from opinion. When they're able to provide activities, they reached until the idea of creating a text that contains fact and opinion. And the trainer specifically mentioned that there was a problem with the activity because it reached beyond distinguish because it already involves creating. So I was happy learning about it, but I think his feedback saying that change create to a lesser degree in terms of skill, change create to present, that really disappointed me as a participant because I felt that even with the change of the verb from create to present, still does not, align with the verb distinguish. So it's a waste of time for students to reach that far, asking students to do something that's not even the target of the activity. I also noticed, Doc Mike, that in their 4 learning events, I felt that there is like a switching or swapping of the learning activity or learning events in the classroom, because I felt that the explore should have been the beginning part of the flow of the experience of the students before they're going to engage. I think that there is a problem also with the sequence of the activities. And finally, in terms of the assessment, in terms of the learning planning, the one that was given to us as an exemplar is not on a daily basis. It was done on a weekly basis. So you cannot really determine if the competency is only for a day or for a week because they clustered everything, and the assessment that is provided at the end of the week is just a formative or a summative assessment. So there's really no checkpoints from time to time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think from your sharing, one important thing that comes out is we may have these 4 learning events in our plan, but it's not enough to have the 4 learning events. It's also important that what we do in each learning event is also aligned to the standards. Okay. So if we are just going to have students do activities, then we are not really helping them achieve the standards. Okay. So again, it's one thing to know what each E consists of, given DepEd's definition, but it also must be really accompanied by alignment in order to achieve the big E, which is effectiveness. Okay, so let's look further at what, thank you, Ryan, for some of the things that the shaping paper is talking about, the IDF, the Instructional Design Framework. It cuts across all learning stages. So all learning stages, elementary to high school. This is a framework to think about. Emphasizes the learners rather than the process. So at the center of the diagram, you have the learner. Gives directions and brings together school administrators, teachers, and learners in a shared understanding of what to accomplish. It provides flexibility, promoting creativity, collaboration. So those deal with 21st century skill. But what I find as a very important point is this, that the IDF is descriptive rather than prescriptive. So it outlines the key elements and considerations in adopting teaching strategies, teaching materials, educational approach required to achieve learning standards. So this is something that for the private schools, there's more flexibility in thinking about this IDF, because what DepEd is saying here, this framework is descriptive. It is not saying that this is the only way for you to think about designing your learning plan. Okay, so we're now going to have to compare that with the EFDT. Okay, so knowing what you already have, even the new trainers, some initial idea of AFDT, are these two mutually exclusive of each other? Are they very different, or are there commonalities, or can we see certain things in 4E in the EFDT and vice versa? So what do you think about that? Jean Royo?
Doc. Good afternoon, Doc.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you repeat the question, Doc?
So the question that you see on the screen is, do they exclude each other? In other words, are these two very different from each other? Or can we see certain parts of one in the other?
Yes po, Doc.
How? What do you see?
In the engaged part po, Doc, if we compare EFDT to the core learning events po, in the engaged part po, sa firm up po, nandiyan na po yung, sandali lang Doc, hindi ko maklaro. Okay, nandiyan na po, in-engage, same po yung engage sa explore, at saka nandiyan na po yung experience, at nakapag-empathize na po yung mga students. And then, if you try to look at it po, in the activity po, nagkaroon lang po siya ng mga different labels of, nagkaroon naman po siya ng different labels po sa 4 learning events. Pero, but they have the same activities if you try to compare the two. Kasi ayun po, Doc.
So for example, where is engage in EFDT? If you're saying na makikita naman yon.